listening to the Pasco Podcast with Mike Carballa. Welcome to Season 3 of Pasco Podcast, a series about leadership and public service. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the nearly 600,000 people of Pasco County, as represented by the Board of County Commissioners. It's through their trust and empowerment of our workforce and leadership team that we're able to bring you this podcast. This podcast is designed to help public servants build leadership skills and leverage them for success by sharing the experiences of our peers.
Hi, I'm Mike Carballa, and welcome to our 31st episode of Pasco Podcast. And welcome to hurricane season for the next 6 months. Here in Pasco, though, we have a dedicated team of professionals working year-round to help us plan for, respond to, and recover from any type of disaster, but especially severe weather, which we're no stranger to in the state of Florida. So joining us here today from our emergency operations team is Manager Abe Philipson and Mitigation and Planning Manager Nolan Ristau. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, so you both have very interesting backgrounds, right? And tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to Pasco County. Why don't we start with you, Abe?
Okay, well, my name is Abe Philipson. I'm the operations manager for the Department of Emergency Management. I started with Pasco EM back in July. Prior to that, though, I was a wildland firefighter for 20 years with the Florida Forest Service. And with that job, it kind of took me all around the state, all around the country on wildland fire incidents. I was a part of the Honor Guard. I was one of the head deans for our basic fire control training for the new cadets. I belonged to a few incident management teams where I would travel the country on different wildfire incidents and hurricane deployments and such. And what brought me here was I finished my master's degree in June, and I was actually talking to an ex-forestry employee, Kavika Bailey, who works for Pasco County Parks and Rec. And he had said, wow, you finished your degree in emergency management. You should look for a job here. It's a great place to work. So I actually went on the website that day, and the position I'm in right now was open. I applied, and here I sit. So it's kind of weird how it all happened. It was very last minute, spur of the moment type of deal. And I had no intention of leaving forestry anytime soon, but it was here. So I took it and jumped ship.
Fantastic. Sometimes our best opportunities are the ones that find us.
Exactly.
Versus that. So any interesting deployments that you had while in the fire service? I find it fascinating.
I have been in areas where, we have been like in wilderness areas where you can have no mechanized equipment. So you get helicoptered in, they drop you off. The one that we had was in California. There was about 250 of us. I was a division supervisor, so I was kind of in charge of where we were at. We had Canadian super scoopers, which are large planes that they fly over the water, they scoop up the water, they come make water drops. We had several hand crews out there, and our job was basically just to steer the fire away from, urbanized areas, right, push it into the wilderness, right, let the snows put it out. So we were pretty much, it was like Castaway, we dug our own latrines. We had certain, guidelines of how we were going to eat, how we were going to dispose of our waste. And it was basically off the grid, no cell phone signal. That part was nice. Cut off from civilization. So it was, that was one of my more interesting ones. You were just cut off from everything, and it was really, really a cool experience.
Yeah, it could be sort of our worst case during a recovery, so we're glad we got you on the team here. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. Nolan, what about you?
Yeah, I've been with emergency management for 4 years now. I started with the county in 2015, working in 911. I did that for a few years. I was a fire rescue dispatcher for a few years, and during that time, I met some of the emergency management staff just day to day, and I decided, well, that's my goal. So I did my master's while I was working in 911 and kept applying until I got a position over here, and been going along ever since.
Well, glad you're sticking it out. Planning is so important, right? So hurricane season's only 6 months long, but you're, like we said before, year round, we're planning. In fact, I think going on right now, right outside this door, we've got our public works team going through some of their plans and things like that and tabletop exercises. So that's fascinating stuff. One of the things that struck me being in this role now, when Ian came through, it was very, very first thing right out of the chute. It's almost like a hazing process, I think, for new county administrators in this county. We had Ian, and one of the things that I just noticed is even when the evacuation orders, get issued, and I worked with Andy on that, and we finally came to the conclusion of when to issue those evacuation orders. The level of complacency that really, really took place. And that was on display too down in Southwest Florida, right, when Ian came through. A lot of folks wishing that they had and they didn't. We had such a close call with Hurricane Ian. What would you say is the main message from emergency management coming out this year that leaders should be sharing with our employees, the public? Give us a little bit about that.
So the main message that we're trying to put out, and this comes from Director Fossa and the regional EM directors as well, is evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Not hundreds of miles, tens of miles. What we saw in Lee County, and there's a really interesting time-lapse video that shows the surge coming in and going over the 20-foot mark of some of these buildings. And it was a really rapid surge. So, it only comes in a few miles. You don't have to go 100 miles away. It's the water that we've got to get away from, not necessarily the winds.
Run from the wind, run from the water, hide from the wind, right?
Exactly. So basically that's the message. It's simple. Just if the evacuation orders are given and you're in an area where you could be susceptible to storm surge, get out. And you don't have to run across the state. You've got neighbors, friends, other acquaintances, a few miles down the road. Just get out of the way of the water. And that's really the unified message that we're trying to put out in the entire state right now.
Yeah, that unified message was on full display. You may or may not know, but we did kind of a first ever tri-county workshop with all the various elected officials. And Director Fossa was there, and so were some of the other folks involved in emergency management from Hillsborough and Pinellas. And talked about just that, look at what this can do, and let's not be complacent with things. Like you say, you don't have to get away too far. Correct. But it gets back to having a plan, right, Nolan? Correct. So I'll kind of push to you. Anything to add to this?
The only thing I'd add is, like you said, make a plan now. If a lot of people are able to sort of identify where they can go, friends, family members, inland or in other parts of the state, make those arrangements now so that when a forecast comes in, you can just pull the trigger on it and get moving early. And then I'd always plan for the worst, right? If you wait too long with evacuation traffic, things could get backed up. So just do it as early as you can. Make the plans now. And if anything happens where you need to change your plan, maybe have a backup plan. Right?
Are there links on emergency management's website to help people plan, resources or things that folks can use?
Yeah. So on our website, all of our evacuation zones are listed. We have a disaster guide online. And on those maps, you'll also see the disaster or the evacuation routes, right? So it's the quickest way to get inland or north if you need to go north.
Gotcha.
So you can plan now, so when the time comes, you already know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I push this same message to our employees, because every employee that works for the county is essential. And, as we stated at the beginning, right, it's always that recovery operation that's really where the heavy lifting is going to be concerned. So it's important that our employees have plans, right? It's important that we take all this seriously. And it's like anything. It's like putting the storm shutters up, right? We may complain about it, and if the hurricane misses us, fantastic. All amounts to that little bit of effort, right? But exactly. That little bit of effort can make a huge difference, whether it's securing your property or being available to help the public and respond to the emergency. So appreciate all of that. Nolan, maybe I'll direct this one to you. Is a lot of people don't see what goes on behind the scenes year round. Can you touch on some of the important work that you do and your team does to help us that folks may not even know about?
Yeah. So year round, we are making or updating our emergency plans.
Okay.
Right? We're in the middle of a 5-year process of updating our comprehensive emergency management plan. And everything that goes into planning, response, recovery, mitigation, all of those we need to plan in the future. So we go step by step through each function that needs to happen during a hurricane, and we write plans for those. As you mentioned right outside, we are doing a tabletop exercise where, okay, we have a plan. Now we need to practice using it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we exercise those plans throughout the year as well. That way everyone's up to date on their roles, their responsibilities, and if there's any issues with the plan, hopefully we can find it while we're all in the same room and nothing bad is happening.
Right.
So we can revise that before something actually.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of folks probably just don't realize that, like our public works guys, they're generally out there right now, clearing right away, taking care of those different things. But when a storm happens, our roles flip. And so practice makes perfect, but it's also kind of helps get the rust off the wheels a little bit, if you will. So that way folks remember what their roles are and do that. So glad you guys are doing that kind of stuff. That's important. Anything to add to that, Abe?
Yeah. Some of our staff, the ones that, fall under myself, I have a coordinator who's a special needs coordinator, and her job year round is to maintain a list of nearly 2,000 Pasco residents who are considered special needs. And what that means is, during an evacuation, they may need to be on oxygen. They may need transportation. They may need assistance from like a healthcare provider. So that list is maintained yearly. It goes into a database. That way, when an evacuation order is given, we have our Go Pasco, we have fire rescue. They assist in transporting these residents to either the Fasano shelter or to Wiregrass Ranch High School, which is our two designated special needs shelters. And that's a heavy lift, and that has to start. We start planning that now, and it's maintained year round. All she does all year long is make sure that list is up to date and gets a hold of the residents and make sure the information hasn't changed. Another one of the staff, they work on ensuring that the comprehensive emergency management plans for all of our medical facilities and ALFs are up to date. It's mandated by the state that they have this, but we also assist in checking them, making sure they're correct, making sure they're having the proper training needed, because in the event of a storm, we have over 100 medical facilities in the county that need to evacuate if they're in an evacuation zone. Bayonet Point Hospital is one of those. That's a huge task. So, behind the scenes, our staff are working year round on this sort of stuff, which before I got here in July, I had no idea. I knew there was a lot of stuff going on, but I wasn't aware of how much went into the planning process in preparation for not only hurricane season, but everything else that comes our way in the state. So it's a lot of work year round. A lot of work.
Yeah, no doubt. And you were kind of instrumental in helping lead. We talk about even lessons learned from storms. We talked a long time about sheltering after Ian and a lot of the things that what went right and what could be better. Yes. And you kind of took the lead on that and helped. So we've worked with our school board partners to revamp that.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of those things that folks just don't realize are going on out there, just to make sure that when we got to pull that trigger, because it's fast. It's a quick flash to bang, right?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Let's talk about leadership in the emergency management field. So, we always talk about people, purpose, performance, and that leadership model is done us well here in the county. Any applications applications in your emergency management field, and maybe some diversions, I guess, based on situational leadership too? You guys care to comment on that?
So one thing I learned in my background is boots on the ground, field work while in fire, kind of you need to do this, you need to follow this, or else bad things can happen.
Right.
Coming here, that role flips a little bit because now I'm working with people that don't necessarily come from that background. So my mindset had to change a little bit. But what I've learned is, it's still the same. One thing that I've been involved within my leadership is leader's intent. And within leader's intent, you have a task, purpose, and an end state. And that's how we do things in the Wildland Fire Service. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it, and this is what it needs to look like when you're done. And the leader's intent is provided because if there's a leadership vacuum, out in the West, you have bad reception. You don't always talk to, you lose communication. So if leadership isn't there, the crews know what to do, as long as they follow within the purview that you've given them with task, purpose, and end state. So for me, I'm still learning how, our leadership values are with the county. That's new to me, but I've walked in with what I know, and it really blends into what we're doing with the county, just different verbiage. So I think that was, looking at the county as kind of an outsider. I think what we have set up here is great. I think the EM department is set up, very well as far as we know how leadership is. We know the expectations that, the county administrator, yourself, and the Board of County Commissioners expect of our department. And it's set up in a way to where we're able to perform that. So that's just kind of my outside perspective, because I haven't been here but 10 months.
Right.
So I'm still learning our leadership processes. So
yeah. Well, a lot of it, like you say, it blends well. And
correct.
As we've talked in other podcasts, sometimes your leadership style has to adapt based on this, on the situation. I know in emergency management, it's sometimes kind of like herding cats. You've got a lot of responsibility,
right?
But you don't run the public works department, yet they are a critical asset in ensuring recovery operations are done well. So, right. As a planner and trying to pull this kind of stuff together, Nolan, maybe comment a little bit on kind of what you got to do to get these things in order.
So a big part of it for me is you have to be able to listen to your counterparts and trust their experience. Because like you mentioned, I'm not a public works expert. I don't really know how all the drains work and everything, but there are a lot of people that do. So part of my job is knowing who to reach out to and trusting their expertise on how to respond to a specific need, and that them and their crews can handle it. And then I just help tie everything together. Because one of the biggest issues that anyone has during an emergency is communication. So the coordination part of my job is probably one of the most important parts of my job during an actual emergency.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, we thank you guys for that. Let's talk about leaders in your industry who've influenced your leadership style, or just any leader in that regard.
Well, for me, 2011 sticks out.
Okay.
The agency, the Florida Forest Service, they brought in a former employee of the agency by the name of Jim Perry, recently passed away last year. He retired from the agency in the early 2000s. Well, they brought him in as a consultant to kind of take a look at, what could the agency do to improve, morale and performance. And he was close to the agency. He was very well liked, so they brought him in. And in my meeting with him, he was asking me questions of where do you want to be, and how do you want your career to advance with the agency, and I told him I'd like to eventually get up into some of the higher management positions, and he asked me about education. I said, well, I started my AS degree in emergency management. I quit when I got this job in fire because I didn't have time to do school, had a family and everything else. And he looked at me and he said, well, you need to make time. You need to finish that. I'm like, okay, so I just kind of blew it off, went home, talked to the wife, and she kind of looked at me. She's like, well, I think this is good for your kids, So I, a year later, went to school, tuition reimbursement to the state, finished my AS degree, and then I kept moving forward. I got my bachelor's in public safety, and then I just kept on moving until I finished my master's in emergency management. And what he said to me just stuck. He said, make time. And all the time I was doing this, I was still going out west. I was gone for months at a time, going to kids' soccer games, still having vacations, always had a laptop with me, always doing homework. And if you ask my family right now, they would probably tell you they wish I'd go back to school because I've got a lot of free time on my hands and I'm driving them crazy. But that just stuck with me. When he just looked at me and said, make time. And I was like, wow. So I've had a lot of leaders in my career, but that's just Mr. Perry was someone that was just he's the one that pushed me to where I am right now by just nudging me saying go do it, and then everything lined up to where I'm sitting right now. So it's really amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and to get a leader in your life that wants you to be better, be a better version of you, and recognizing your potential and trying to cultivate that is fantastic. Same with the make time, and make time applies across the board. Right, yeah. We can get so buried in the day-to-day trivial details. Like we always have a saying about working in the business versus working on the business.
Right.
And at various points in your career, the amount of time you spend in the business versus on the business changes.
Absolutely.
It changes. And so making time to do what's important at whatever stage you're in your career or your life is important. Great advice. Fantastic. Well, we're glad he impressed that upon you. Yeah. So fantastic. Nolan, how about you?
I came into the county at kind of a pivotal time back in 2015, where a lot of effort was put into evaluating processes and trying to improve everything. So when I started in 911, I actually started the day after one of their first SWOT analysis. So they had looked through everything that was happening at the time, all the processes, structure by structure, and they found ways that they needed to improve them. So I've kind of kept that with me throughout all my different positions here. Not to be complacent with something just because it barely works, or you can get something done when you can be trying to improve your processes and get a better result at the end because of the work you're doing now. Yeah. And leadership is about innovation, driving change, and getting in there and not accepting the status quo for what it is. It's very easy for us to do that in government. Government has the momentum. It's easy. It's tough to build up sometimes. It's easy in emergency management. You can look at other similar counties that may be in a transitional period as far as population goes. Right. And some of them are, this is what we have and it's worked. And some other counties are trying to adapt to changes. And I think throughout the state, as things keep happening, you'll kind of see the benefit for each as time goes on. Oh, fantastic. In your industry and given the nature of your work, any unique leadership challenges that you've faced, and how did you overcome them? I'll start with this one. Yeah. All right. Oh, so ready to go here. I like it. Since I was talking about change, that's one of the biggest challenges. I mentioned earlier we're doing our comprehensive emergency management plan is on a 5-year cycle. It gets updated every 5 years. Pasco County, even 5 years ago, is pretty different than Pasco County today. I agree. Almost across the board, everything is quite different. So adapting to those changes, even in the planning stage, is it's a big challenge. And trying to do it each year instead of waiting 5 years is probably the best way to go. But even addressing any of the changes can have a cascading effect on all the other plans, right? If we need to plan to have more shelters available, worst case scenario, then that impacts our transportation plan. It impacts all of our other operation plans. Correct. It pulls people away from other functions. So just keeping up with change is probably the most difficult part. Fantastic. Any lessons for how you've been able to successfully adapt to that? I think being more proactive is the best thing we've found, both with operations and planning. Gotcha. Trying to do things ahead of time to maybe mitigate impacts before they even happen. And then when you're planning, you have to plan with the future in mind instead of the present. So if the current trend says that the population will continue to grow, you should plan for that now instead of waiting until the next census. You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Abe, something to add? Yeah, and Nolan went over the process. I'm going to kind of go over the people. I think there's and it's not a bad challenge, it's a good challenge, but the field of emergency management,
you go back 20, 30 years, was primarily filled with, fire, police, military, people who have retired coming into a new career. They already understand the boots on the ground. They've been in the field. They know how it works. And today, the pendulum has swung to academics. So academics is extremely important. I did it midway through my career, but we have a lot of people that are, getting their education and then getting into the workforce, then getting into emergency management. So there's a balance because they've got the education, but the experience may or may not be there depending on what they've done. So that can be challenging. It's a good challenge because it's also bringing in a fresh perspective. Those of us who've been in the field for 20, 25 years, we've done the same thing, and and it's like, okay, well, this is how it needs to be. This is how it's always worked. Right. But the younger generation, I've got a 27-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son, and they're trying to tell me how to change things, and I'm like, but they're right, So for me, it's being receptive, and I think the EM field across the country, it's being receptive to the younger generation coming in, because we're not going to be here forever, and we've got to get them ready for it. So it's been a strong push on academics and college, which is good, but just understanding that some of them may not have the field experience, we need to embrace that, and that's one thing that that Director Fossa does is we have pushed people out into, assignments, the Kentucky flood assignments, Lee County assignments, other disasters that have happened. We're pushing our people into the field to get that experience. So recognizing it, but then also acting on it, so it's the people in the process is really where it's at, and it's moving in the right direction. It really is. Yeah. So
it kind of sounds like to me like we're moving from something that sounds like a retirement gig or something that while first responders had a lot of the skills, it's transforming into a profession where we're looking more at education and looking at a lot of lessons learned. And I think that only benefits the industry. It benefits the citizens when it comes to protecting us. And again, Florida is just, we're seeing it. It's not an if question. It's always a when question, and we're seeing more and more of that.
Well, and the college is important. People, you learn professional writing. I mean, we're having to write plans, and those plans, can't look. They can't be written poorly. This is a public document. We're trying to get people to jump on board and embrace this. So that's. It's very important. So the college portion of it is extremely important.
So that's nice lead into the next question I wanted to ask is, as we continue to grow and look for qualified folks to work in this industry, what qualities are you guys looking for in folks for them to come join this awesome team?
I think more than anything, I'm looking for somebody who can adapt. I've probably said that a few times already, but somebody that can take like Abe said, an educational background and adapt it to be functional in a local government. It can be hard to do. It's a unique skill to have a knowledge base based on academic learning and transition it into something functional right now. So we really look at people who are either multifaceted or are really interested in continuing to grow. So that's one of the biggest things that I look for.
Gotcha. Adaptability and then that curiosity and desire to continue to grow and be educated. Abe?
Yeah, I mean it's difficult. It can be very, very difficult because when people go through the application process, there's minimum standards for certain positions, and sometimes you've got to weed through applications. But it's important to look at all of them. And I would say for someone who's wanting to get into this, you've got to stand out. If you don't have the education, show where you have the boots on the ground, show where you have volunteered in disaster management and disaster response, or have a strong background in planning or a strong background in training and teaching. So, you have to look for those qualities, and you only have a sheet of paper sometimes to go by.
Yeah.
But collectively, we do that, and we look at all of those very closely. And then, it's you also have to look at, are they going to mend well with the group? Mm-hmm. We have a very interesting dynamic in the EM, and it's great because everybody feeds off of each other. It works really, really well. So that's another thing. You want to make sure that whoever you're bringing in is going to mesh well with the group. So it's challenging, and the field right now is so competitive, with so many people with experience and education, and competing with the private sector. It's very hard. It's very, very hard to find that individual. But I mean, that's part of our job is to find those people.
Yeah.
So
that's great advice. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there that I think are looking to join this type of field, and so you've got some good stuff. Are there any questions that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you guys today before I get to the unscripted questions?
No, I'm pretty good with that.
So. No. All right. Well, let's do a few rapid fires here. Abe, favorite dessert?
Italian ice.
Nice. Nolan? Tiramisu. I'm with you. Yeah. Good job. All right. If you had to change your first name, what would it be?
I like Abraham. I mean, that's my name. I like it. But if I had to change it,
it's the OG of names, isn't it?
I'll Wolfgang.
Wolfgang. Sweet.
I'd pick Abraham.
Look at that. All right. Well, that's awesome. Good spy code name if you were a spy.
Captain America.
Love it.
Can't tell you.
It's because he's a spy. Yeah, fair enough. I like that. Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Guys. Would you rather travel to the past or the future?
Future.
Wow.
I'm so interested in history, it'd be the past for me. Gotcha. The past.
Gotcha.
I would, yes.
Cannonball or dip the toe in the water?
Oh, cannonball.
Dip the toe in.
Yeah.
Not a strong swimmer. So I'm going back out.
I'm jumping right in. It's all good.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, Wolfgang, Abraham, thanks for being here today. It was great to have you both. And special thanks to our media relations team who makes this effort possible. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Pasco Podcast. I'm Mike Carballa. See you next time.
For more information on Pasco County government, please visit mypasco.net and check us out on Facebook and Twitter.